welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast on everything disability. Today we have usual guest Samantha Connor. So nice of you to join us once again.
Great to be
We
here.
will be
Thanks,
talking about
guys.
the Disability Royal Convention. How's it going, Samantha?
Yeah, it's good. It's been busy. It's International Women's Day today, so everyone has been flat out. So yeah,
Awesome,
happy
awesome.
International Women's Day and Friday night.
I'm just gonna echo Samantha and to all the women out there. Keep doing what you do best. Happy International Women's Day.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for that, Samantha. Welcome. Jordan, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to I'm so back to talk about what should be the episode of the Disability Royal Commission.
Yeah, can't wait to hear all about it. Let's get into it. Samantha, firstly, what is a hate crime? And how do people with disability know if they have been victim of a hate crime?
It's so interesting
Um,
because we don't
yep.
have any hate crime laws in Australia, right? So there's hate crime laws in America. There's hate crime laws in England, but we don't have any in Australia. So it's a whole new conversation for us. But the Royal Commission didn't actually say that we need hate crime laws or talk about hate crime, even though people gave evidence about hate crimes. So hate crime is when someone, it's not just disabled people, it's people who might be gay or, from the queer community. They might be people who come from what they call a protected group. So if you have brown skin or you come from a different cultural background or religious background, a hate crime is someone who gets picked on and there's a criminal act carried out because of their difference, is the easiest way to describe it. But it's a whole new conversation here because, yeah, we're all disabled. But if somebody maybe attacks a disabled person for money, that's not a hate crime. But if people there's an element to it where they say we hate you and they use a disability slur. If you're picked on or bullied because you're disabled, that's what a hate crime is.
Interesting. Interesting. Thank you for that, Samantha. So, Samantha, what's the difference between vilification, hate speech, and hate crime?
Yeah,
You
so
did mention that.
yeah,
Yep.
so you know how disability language changes. We have a few years ago it was okay to use the R word, or it was never okay really, but it was a bit more accepted. And so it depends on where you are, but most people know that you can't use that word anymore. But people still use a lot of ableist words. Vilification is when you have your group used against you. So you might be called the R word directly to you. You're not just saying it to like a non-disabled person, or you're an R word. Um, so it's you know how the kids say, "Oh, that's a bit gay," you know. That's not vilification because they're saying it about something else. But if somebody who's gay gets attacked and in speech and people say, they say, I'm trying not to use the words here,
Yeah.
but so
No, it's okay.
I'm a lesbian. So if somebody said to me, "Oh, look, you're a horrible dyke," that would be something that's actually a bad thing to say to someone because they're a lesbian. So when you're talking about disability vilification, it means they'd use those words against you, or they'd say something hateful to you or really nasty to do with your disability. And so, yeah, there's hate speech and vilification in a criminal context is what we're talking about.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for sharing. So, Samantha, Professor Nicole Asquith from the Australian Hate Crime Network told us about how often people with disabilities face violence just because of their disability. So, how can we start fighting this kind of violence in our communities?
Oh, there's a question, right? So it was really interesting. Nicole Asquith is one of the people who's very across disability as well as hate crimes against other groups. And so, do you guys remember Snowtown? Do you remember the Snowtown movie and what happened with all those murders in South Australia a few years ago? Did you hear about that?
Do you want to give us a recap?
Yeah, there was a big movie called Snowtown, and there was a whole bunch of people. I think it was 11 or 12 people who were murdered by a group of people. And when you look at, they were murdered horribly. They were tortured and called hateful things, and so. But people don't realise that half of the people who were murdered were disabled people in that horrible tragedy. So some of the people were also gay, so it makes it a little bit tricky. And then some of the people, the reason they used to kill them was that they were different. They said that they were pedophiles, and they made up these lies about them. And they also killed them for their DSP. So Nicole works in criminology, and she understands, a whole bunch of stuff about hate crimes against different groups of people. So, I mean, the first thing you need to do is to have awareness of this. So, if we don't recognize that the reason that people get picked on and people have criminal acts carried out against them is because they're disabled or because they're gay or because they're trans, then we can't do anything to fight it. So, you've got to recognize it first. That's the first step, is education and awareness. The next thing is changing the law. Is, we need hate crime legislation in Australia to make sure that we protect people with disability from violence. And then also that we've got ways to report it. Because at the moment you go to the cops and you say, well, somebody did this to me, and then they also said something hateful or did something hateful because I'm disabled. There's no way to collect that information, to collect that data, and to do anything about it. Yeah, it's a tricky thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Samantha. Look, the DRC report says that the laws right now don't really protect people with disabilities from being bullied or hated on. So, what can we do to change the Disability Discrimination Act to make sure it covers hate against people with disabilities?
So really interesting. But one of the recommendations in the Royal Commission is to change the DDA. Have either of you guys ever had a DDA complaint? Have you ever done that with
No.
the? You haven't. Oh, geez, Ibby. It's a cultural experience. You
I
should do it.
know.
It's so much fun. Nothing
Let's
happens.
get on to it.
Say
Yeah.
again, sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I guess we never really look into the act, but I think it's something. Yeah, we should I guess keep our eyes on.
Well, they kind of, if you lodge a DDA complaint for discrimination right now, pretty much nothing happens. So if you go to
Oh.
McDonald's and you can't get in because there's steps or whatever, there's a discrimination issue. The only thing that the Human Rights Commission do is call a mediation meeting, and then you have to kind of go to court after that if because if they can't do anything, if the McDonald's says, well, we're not going to put a ramp in, there's nothing you can do about it. So the Royal Commission say that they need to change the DDA, but we think that putting in provisions around, I mean, the Criminal Act should have hate crime provisions in the Criminal Act of Australia, but there should also be an understanding in the DDA that people are discriminated against in the way of hate crimes as well.
Yeah. No, interesting. Thank you for that, Aswanda. So describe how the DRC, response is dealing with the issues of thin markets and providers of last resort.
Ah. Oh, I love that term, the providers of last resort. So what that term means is that thin markets means that there's not enough disability service providers in an area to be able to service that area well. And so you might have waiting lists as well. So there might be enough disability service providers, but they've got a 2-year waiting list or something. So if you can't get a service, like a lot of people will die without a service. So, Jonathan, you've got reasonably high support needs and you have a lot of workers, yeah? So that's, a good example. If you moved in an area that there was nobody around to help you, then that would be a massive issue. So the Disability Royal Commission heard lots of stories from people, and they said that we need to make sure that we've got access to essential services, even in areas where you've got limited providers. They said, maybe we could put in place government incentives for service providers to work in areas where there's not many people. So we're somewhere regional in New South Wales that doesn't have many people. You guys are both Bankstown-y kind of way, yeah?
Yeah. Well, I'm in Bankstown. I think Jonathan's more North Sydney.
Okay, cool.
I'm in Santa.
Yes, North Shore. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm more
cool.
southwest.
Cool. So where's a country town that's like miles away from everywhere?
I'd say more western, like Victon and Basketball Town. Is all
Oh no,
about it's all too
go into the
far.
country. We're in the country in a country town. What's a little country town in New South Wales? You boys are too
I'm not too
city.
sure. We're all city people. That's right.
You are.
Maybe the Blue Mountains up that way.
Oh yeah. So I mean, if you lived out that way, there might not be many disability service providers, but the reason that they'll say is because there might not be many disabled people because it doesn't have a big population. You just thought of
Oh
something.
yeah.
Where?
Well, there's also like Griffiths. There's
Oh yeah. I'm
what
gonna
do you
go
call
there.
it? There's that other town, Armadale. There's a few
Yeah, I know
out
where that
there,
is. Yep. Yeah. So if you've got a
and they
town,
all
say you've
do
got a
like
town
the
with
same.
4,000. Yeah, if you've got a town with 4,000 people in it, you might only have 100 people with a disability. And so they're going to say,
Yeah,
well, it's not worth our while to go and open up a service there,
exactly.
So,
Broken Hill as well, from top of my head as well. That's
yeah,
all the way at the end.
yeah. So for people in those country towns, there's some really big issues around there. Provider of last resort means that you have usually a government provider where you have somewhere where you can go, especially if you've got lower support needs or you're in a regional area with thin markets. Provider of last resort means that they're going to take you if nobody else wants to. But New South Wales has privatised all of the disability
Yes.
services. So not Victoria hasn't and WA hasn't. I'm not sure about the rest, but New South Wales government got out of disability. So we don't have that provider of last resort now in New South Wales. So they're saying that we do need to have a backup for when people can't get services.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
good. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing some of that. The DRC report talks a lot about how people with disabilities are still facing hate and bullying. So why do we need to make sure that the laws against hate speech include people with disabilities?
Yeah.
So
It's
how do we make that?
I don't know if you saw the news this week, but there was a young kid who was an autistic kid who got beaten up by a gang of young people, and so this happens all the time. So I'm autistic. I come from a big community of people that will tell you that part of their life, part of any disabled person's life is at school quite often is bullying, right? But for the autistic community especially, there seems to be really big issues there. So people are saying that, look, it's a bit of a different thing being bullied to being bullied because you're part of a particular group, So that's where the hate comes into it. And so it's not about who you are, right? Because people don't know who you are. They're just people who pick on you because they don't know who you are. People are picking on you because of what you are and what group you belong to. And that's which, it's never okay to bully, but it's especially not okay to bully if it's about what group you belong to, or what disability you have, or what religion or skin color you have, and your difference.
Yeah, it should happen. It should not happen.
Nah,
Thank you
exactly.
for that, Samantha. The report suggests that we should change the Disability Discrimination Act to make hating on people with disabilities against the law.
Yeah.
How would this change affect the lives of people with disabilities? And what kind of problems might we face in making sure this law is followed?
I think it's part of the issue is that, some people, I don't think anybody's got a problem with introducing hate speech, and it would probably be in the Criminal Act of Australia. I don't think anyone's really got a problem with introducing hate speech and hate crime legislation around disabled people. The issue is that some people want to be able to say and do what they want, right? So, they've got, and this comes down to racism, down to queerphobia, down to a bunch of other things. But I don't think anyone's against it for disability. So the people who object to the law are people who want to be able to say what they like about brown people, or to exclude trans people from sport, or whatever, So I think the problem around, having laws that prevent discrimination and having laws that criminalise acts, there's a balance there around free speech and a whole bunch of other things. We don't have free speech laws in Australia, but criminalising those acts means that it would involve a whole bunch of things. You'd have to make sure that people have an understanding of what those protections are. We'd need training for law enforcement. And the biggest thing would be to overcome those societal biases against the idea of criminalising hate crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. That's a great point. And so people with disabilities might also be part of other groups. So there's the intersectionality, like different races, genders, or sexual orientation. So how does being part of these groups make the hate or violence worse? And what extra steps should we take to protect them?
Well, so as I said, I'm a lesbian, so I've got a different sexual attraction, and then also I have a disability. But there's, people who are brown people, or, from different racial backgrounds. There's people who have different religions. There's a whole bunch. So if you're marginalised and you have more of those identities, then there's more ways to pick on you and to commit more reasons for people who are like that to commit crimes against you, right? So I think it's a difficult thing for us to talk about in our communities, even because sometimes we have, we have discrimination from within our own groups. Even, the gay community isn't particularly accepting of disabled people quite often. So it really, sometimes it comes from within our cultural communities, whatever they are. The steps that we need to do, apart from putting in place those specific legal protections, would be putting targeted support services in, but also awareness campaigns, within our different communities. So I think it would be good to have a campaign on the inside of the gay community to understand that people who are queer not only, experience bullying and hate crime um, and hate speech because they're gay, but also because they're disabled if they're a disabled person. And the same thing goes for all of those other communities. So I think it would be a long campaign to get everyone to understand this, but I also think it would be a really valuable thing to do.
Yeah. No, it's good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, very important that we move forward rather than backwards. The report said that this really commission report also found that people with disability get a lot of hate online. So what should the website as well as social media do to make the internet a safer place for everyone?
Yeah, I think getting people with disability involved in those in the actual rule making around this is a good idea. So if you have those platforms like Facebook or Twitter, um, maybe Twitter's not a great example because Elon Musk is autistic. That's not great. But, but
Mhm.
Facebook, making sure that we've got people who have a disability and can understand to say, we need to make sure that the reporting for this is accessible. So if you're a blind person who's being bullied online because you're blind, you need to be able to report it in a way that doesn't involve going to 50 million different settings and trying to navigate through that, right? So it needs to have accessible reporting mechanisms, but also the websites and social media platforms need to have stricter moderation platforms. So they need to understand that it's not okay to use hate speech against people on the basis of their particular characteristic, including disability.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point. There are also stories in the report about people with disability getting bullied or hurt in places like the park, so public places, or even on the bus. How can we make more people aware and ready to help when they see this happening?
I love there's a thing called a bystander program, which is about making sure that people step in when it's safe to do that, so in
Oh,
those public places, but also just stuff like making sure that we've got good design of parks and stuff. So we're not walking down dark alleys or, in places where it might be dangerous. I think a lot of it comes down to a community education and people having an understanding of, being a society where we're codependent, we're able um, to look after each other and to make sure we look out for each other, but also making sure we've got legal frameworks that protect our rights and dignity, and also accessible reporting mechanisms. So we've got police who understand disability, we've got courts that understand disability. Everything that happens from before a crime happens all the way through to after needs to be addressed.
yeah, exactly. But speaking of the police, the DRC recommends that the police work closer with people with disability to stop violence based on gender and other reasons. What does this mean and why is it important?
So based on gender, so International Women's Day, um, gender-based violence crosses, like, violence is about power, not necessarily gender. And in our society, most men hold the power over women, unfortunately. Um, but also more disabled men are targeted by women, weirdly, in the disability sector, because we've got more women working in care roles, we've got more men who are in receipt of care and have less power. So it's not reversed, but it's a little bit less gendered than it is in other places. But we need to recognise that women, especially, are, especially with sexual violence, targeted all the time. But it's a great um, larger rates than it is for non-disabled women. So there's a really important part of that. And the way that we're targeted as well is also very gender biased.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Samantha. Looking at what people told
What
the
about the treatment of police towards people with disabilities?
I just missed the middle of that, Jonathan. So what about people with disability?
About the treatment of police.
Police. So police
What
quite often.
about the treatment of people with disabilities by police?
It's a massive issue. There's oh gosh, where do you start? Gosh, there's people who are not listened to because we're disabled. There's people who experience carer violence because and can't get support to report independently. I heard a story about a deaf woman who had to report being hurt by her husband, but her husband was interpreting for her to the police at the door, because there's no interpreter. So that's not ideal. There's, there's so many issues where police just don't understand what it's like for people with disability. And so for so many of us, it's not safe to talk to police as well, because we might be left in a particular situation where they say, well, no, you're okay, you're in a group home, you're being looked after by those people, but those people might not be safe. You're okay because you're over there in the disability sector. There needs to be more training for police, but there needs to be more understanding. And I think people with disability have a role to play in being able to engage with the police force. Half of the people who are shot by police across Australia are people with disability and mental health conditions. So that's a really big statistic that we need to address.
And it's good that you point that out, Samantha. Mental health is big, and it needs to be looked after. So looking at what people told the DRC and what the report suggests, what does this tell us about how society views disability? And is Australia's disability strategy working when it comes to attitudes?
Yeah, I don't think it is, because we're kind of seen as the pit or the pedestal, right? So we're thought of as people who are inspirational, or people who are in need of charity. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to the shop and someone gives you a discount because you're disabled. I always go, yeah, sure now. I used to say, no, it's okay. Now I'm like, yeah, sure. But people think that we're charity cases, or they really have a weird attitude about us. Like we're just general people who have our bodies or minds work a little bit differently from theirs, and everyone's different anyway. The only time that people in schools, because we've got segregated schools, quite often see a very disabled person is when that person comes in to do a talk. Usually it's a quadriplegic who's been in a car crash. And, so I remember Stella Young going into a school as a teacher, as a very young teacher in Victoria, and being told, "Oh, are you coming in here to talk to us about your car crash?" No. So people don't really have an understanding of disability. And I don't know about you, but I can tell when people can have a relative or someone they know in their family who's disabled, because they're not weird with us, so they're a bit more normal with us. So we've got a long way to go. But the answer to making sure that people change their attitude around disability is to make sure that we're in the world, in our schools, in society, at work, with everybody else. It's a little bit chicken.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Especially, when people know that you have a master's degree and their
Yeah.
reactions like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
It's so unbelievable. I mean, it's so magical. How do you do it?
It's like
Yeah, it's
how many other
nothing
people have
big.
got masters?
They they sometimes set the bar so low for uh,
I
Yeah,
didn't
we need
understand
to
you, Jonathan.
change our
Sorry, what was that?
attitude.
Yeah, yeah, they do. And the only way that we're going to get that is to make sure that all the disability strategy works and that we're in the same world as the non-disabled people and they're in our world too.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you for that. So, I thought, what changes do we need to make to be more welcoming and respectful to everyone?
We need to make sure, as I said, we need to make sure that we're in the world, that we don't have segregation. When we're living in different places, schooling in different places, that's what needs to change. We need to have non-segregated laws, but we also need to have the same rights as other people. It shouldn't. It's still illegal in Australia to pay people $2 an hour, and that shouldn't be okay.
Yeah,
We shouldn't be, paid $2 an hour because we're disabled, right? So
yeah,
those things need to be changed, and we need to be able to get the support that we need to be who we are and to be living in the same world as everybody else.
yeah, yeah. We need to, use our voice, raise our voice, make change, create change, come together. That's what it's all about.
Totally.
Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think at the moment people are getting frustrated with the pace of change and disheartened by would you agree that there's so much happening behind the scenes that we don't see in the media?
Yeah, I think there is stuff that happens behind the scenes all the time. And I'm also frustrated with the pace of change, I can tell you, because I want things to happen right now, not before, after we die. Um, Yeah, I talked to I was talking to a group of people with long COVID, newly disabled people who have long COVID, and some other people who can't go into the community because they're at severe risk of COVID. And I talked to somebody from the union today, from the Oc Health and Safety area, and he told me a bunch of things that I didn't know was going on because the unions have been having quiet conversations with people and they're involved in a world stage and internationally as well. So there are things that happen at different levels that we don't know about. I think that needs to be a bit more transparent. Um, but also, I agree, it's really slow. Um, that progress in the disability rights movement takes a very long time. And quite often it's longer than, we have short lifespans, a lot of us. So it's longer than our lifespans. I wish it would hurry up as well, Jonathan, and they get a bloody move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need
We
more
just got
progress.
two comments. So one of the viewers said in the football there was a bit of a name calling. Is that a hate crime or is that teasing?
That where was the name calling? Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll repeat the question. So that's sorry. So in the football, regular
Oh,
was
in the
a bit of
football.
name
Yeah.
calling. Is this hate crime or just teasing?
Oh, well, I mean, it was Adam Goods, wasn't it, who was called an ape or something? They were making like some
Yeah.
reference to. So, you know, I mean, if you're calling someone a derogatory comment that's related to their racial background, then that's not teasing. You know, that's, you can say you're a shit footballer. You can say that you're, you know, don't like you, whatever. But when you start to drag someone's race into it, and you know, that's when it gets tricky. So that was very firmly in my mind, you know, that's vilification that and you know, proven to be vilification. It's hard though, right? Because we've got a culture of sledging, they call it. I'm not sporty enough. I don't know these things. You know, they call it sledging. So having yelling on the football field. But you should never bring somebody's race or somebody's disability or difference into it, because that's when it starts to get into that muddy territory, and it hurts a lot more, you know, especially when that person has had and you guys know, like, you've had stuff directed at you in the schoolyard and whatever. It hurts more than someone just saying that you're a dickhead.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. No,
I'm
true.
not
Thank
calling
you.
either of you dickheads, Jonathan. It's okay.
Thanks for clarifying. And also another comment. So yeah, giving a back up. So yeah, why is the criminalized disability act against life crimes? And another person that's got a disability picks on another person with a disability. So how would you work with that?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. What is the criminalized
The
disability
disability
against?
act against life crimes.
Hate
Another
crime.
person
Oh,
that's
hate crimes. Yeah.
So against one person with a disability against another person with disability.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like
It's a good question.
ableism.
Like me
It's a
and
good
Jonathan.
question,
for
right?
example.
Yeah. I mean, if I don't know, like, I mean, I could be picking on you on the basis of, gosh, it's tricky. So, Jonathan, if you had to go at me, and you had to go at me because, like, I'm autistic and have ADHD, and you made reference to my disability and the types of ways that I behaved or whatever, because of those types of things, arguably it would be it'd be hate speech. I mean, we're not talking about physical violence here, we're talking about hate speech. So it is a tricky question though, you know. So what happens when you have one brown person saying something to another brown person? I don't know. Is your racial background white, Jonathan? Like, I could call you, somebody called someone a silly white bastard, you know. If I called you a silly white bastard and we're both white, it really wouldn't mean very much. I mean, I don't think that person would take it to a court or anything to say, you know, you called me a silly white bastard, because, you know, white people hold all the power in the world, and it doesn't really cut much. But, you know, so it's a tricky thing. I think they're the things that would need to be sorted out once we start to have this discussion. But really good question.
Thanks for the clarification, Samantha. Awesome. Also, Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I just want to say the pace of change can be slow, but together we are stronger.
Yep.
We have faced many adversities through life, and we need to maintain our collective effort to keep the disability commission from collecting dust on the shelves of history.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jonathan. There's our voices are so much softer than a lot of other loud voices. So the only way we can really make that impact is to have a collective voice and to make sure that we all speak. We don't need to speak as one, but we need to speak with, we need to speak together and make sure all the voices in the room are in the room.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
We
Matt.
would like to thank you very much, Samantha, for being on the show once again. It's always an honor to have you, talking about, the DRC and the NDIS and many other topics relating to disability and how we can move forward with that. It's always great to pick your brain, Samantha. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's always great to see you guys. Thanks again. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
See ya.
Thank you. And you've been watching CripChat. You're a good podcast. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
It's still recording, John. End it.